Now, as a Southerner, I've had to bite my tongue on this issue my entire life until my mouth was full of blood. Well, not anymore.
The issue is race, and the Southerner is President Lyndon Baines Johnson, as played by Bryan Cranston on Broadway. After 5 years as the chemistry teacher turned meth dealer on Breaking Bad, Cranston has let his hair grow to capture the ambition and tragedy of the larger-than-life Texan.
The only thing that I really felt about Lyndon Johnson coming into this production was his Waterloo, Vietnam. And hey, LBJ, how many kids you killed today?
What Cranston found in the script written by Pulitzer Prize-winning playwright Robert Schenken was very different.
Now you call yourself the leader of the liberal wing of the Democratic Party and show me some goddamn leadership!
This play all the way covers that first year, and it is Lyndon Johnson really at his best, when he accomplished something that many people thought could never be accomplished, the Civil Rights Act in 1964.
You see him as a heroic figure?
In many ways, yes, because he went against the norm in a time in the early 60s when he just as easily could have just let it be the status quo.
I mean, what the hell's the point in being president if you can't do what you know is right?
The real LBJ actually spoke those words in the dark days after Dallas, rejecting the advice of aides who told him it was bad politics to attempt a civil rights bill.
No memorial oration or eulogy could more eloquently honor President Kennedy's memory than the earliest possible passage of the Civil Rights Bill for which he fought so long.
To Lyndon Johnson, ending segregation was about more than honoring a dead president. It was about his own experience as a young man teaching Mexican-American children in a forsaken little Texas town called Cotulla.
But there would come a day for each and every one of them when I would see the light in their eyes die, because they discovered that the world hated them just because of the color of their skin.
It never even occurred to me in my fondest dreams that I might have the chance to help the sons and daughters of those students.
For all his charisma, John F. Kennedy had failed to pass civil rights legislation. But Johnson, with his encyclopedic knowledge of Congress, knew how to bend it to his will.
Now I do have that chance. And I'll let you in on a secret. I mean to use it.
He tape-recorded virtually every phone call he made as president, so you can listen in as he horse trades with Senate Republican leader Everett Dirksen, getting his vote on civil rights in return for a flood control project.
What's the total cost? The total cost of the project, I think, is $30-something million. Now, it's in that area of Illinois that's distressed. Let me get on, I'll call you back.
22 minutes later, LBJ told Dirksen he would have his project.
Yeah, and don't you tell anybody now that you got a back door to the White House.
Even his Attorney General, Robert Kennedy, who hated him almost as intensely as he mourned his dead brother, had to hand it to LBJ.
It'd be just a miracle getting this bill. I mean, who could have thought a year ago that we'd get this bill?
My fellow Americans, I am about to sign into law the Civil Rights Act of 1964.
When Johnson signed the bill into law on July 2nd, 1964, Martin Luther King stood front and center. John Lewis, one of the frontline soldiers in the battle against segregation, saw its impact.
It brought down those signs that said white men, colored men, and those signs are gone. Those visible signs are gone, and they will not return.
The country we're living in today is more Lyndon Johnson's country than the country of any other president we've had.
Starting in 1965, Joseph Califano was Johnson's chief domestic advisor.
We were passing about 100 bills a year, 100 significant bills a year, many more than that.
Medicare, Medicaid, federal aid to education, clean air, clean water, a whirlwind of legislation that made up Johnson's great society.
He was consumed with poverty and he was consumed with racial justice. And that affected decision after decision.
When state troopers attacked civil rights marchers in Selma, Alabama, clubbing John Lewis to his knees,
Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States.
Johnson responded with a speech to a joint session of Congress calling for passage of another landmark bill.
It is wrong, deadly wrong, to deny any of your fellow Americans the right to vote in this country.
And then, in an act of transcendent symbolism, the President of the United States embraced the refrain from the great civil rights anthem.
But really, it's all of us who must overcome the crippling legacy of bigotry and injustice. And we shall overcome.
I was sitting next to Martin Luther King Jr., and I looked at Dr. King. Tears came down his face, he cried. And we all cried a little to hear President Johnson saying, and we shall overcome.
But at the same time he was using his political genius to transform America, Johnson was dragging the country into a war he knew he could not win.
So this is the room everybody wishes didn't exist.
Yeah.
The Vietnam War.
Vietnam War.
His granddaughter, Catherine
you don't
Robb,
remember
says the LBJ Library in Austin, Texas makes no attempt to downplay the tragedy of the war.
Unfortunately, you can't truly show his presidency without also showing this.
Listen in as he talks about Vietnam with his national security advisor, McGeorge Bundy.
I don't see what we can ever hope to get out of there with once we're committed. I don't think it's worth fighting for, and I don't think we can get out. And it's just the biggest damn mess I ever saw.
It's an awful mess.
If ever a single photo captured LBJ's agony over Vietnam, it is this. Listening to a tape recording from one of the Marines he had sent to fight, his own son-in-law.
For years, I couldn't look at that without crying. That's my grandfather getting a report from my father when he was over in Vietnam.
By 1968, there were over 500,000 American troops in Vietnam, and the war had become so divisive, Johnson felt he had no choice but to surrender the power of the presidency.
I shall not seek, and I will not accept the nomination of my party for another term as your president.
Johnson's legacy is on display today, both in the form of the Vietnam Memorial, which cuts a black gash across the National Mall, and in the person of Barack Obama, who, according to now Congressman John Lewis, was able to become president as a result of that Voting Rights Act.
I think Lyndon Johnson did more to free, to liberate Black America than anyone since Abraham Lincoln.
How should we balance what you've just told me about what he did for Black Americans and for all Americans with Vietnam?
I think if it hadn't been for Vietnam, he would be considered as one of the great presidents of all time.